Good morning, everyone. Happy week to you. Hope your day is going incredible, and welcome to the week one of the Diamond Heart Project for the August 2025 edition, second edition of this program. And so it's an honor to hold space for you and provide this information and support you in your practices, in this deeper connection to self for you and connection to your intuition space. Your heart's just much more than that, like just really a deeper connection to who you are and your true essence of your being, and being able to walk in the light of the day, feeling deeper connected and feeling just really grounded and centered in your empowerment and your truth and your purpose and all of you are. And so we're starting out the video today, the first video of the program, and going to run through some foundations around setting up sacred practices and begin to dive into this beautiful way of honoring like who you are. And so today's the topic is going to be the total being practice that we're going to cover, and then we're going to talk about sacred space, empowerment, and power ritual, or aka also intention we'll cover later on in the program as well. But the sacred space is really important. And then from there, we're going to dive into the first practice or activity of the week around fasting. And so we're just going to cover this real quick. A lot of this is just pointers I want to give out. I want to allow a lot of the program to be involved in discussion, in communication. And so this can be done with the integration calls that we have twice a week, or questions any other way. But I just want to get some information here to kind of spark the interest or kind of get the ball moving around these practices and go from there. So the first one we'll cover is going to call the total being practice. And total being practice is, again, referencing and honoring that every part of your being, you have 4 different bodies to who you are. You have an emotional body, mental body, energetic body, and physical body. And they all relate to each other. And a lot of times when we have, say, medical ailments, it's not just physical. There is an underlying emotional layer to it. There's an underlying mental layer to it, and as well as an energetic layer. And these all things relate. The body is the physical component of the communication of like, hey, let me show you there's an imbalance here happening. And we need to look at, is this emotionally tied to some imbalanced emotions? Is this tied to a trapped, or not trapped, but like a limiting belief system that we're holding on to? Is tied to some energy that isn't moving through our system. But mostly all, if not everyone, as far as medical ailments, aren't always just physical. There's always underlying components to it. There's a consciousness to that imbalance in the system. And so our deeper work is able to go into these spaces within ourselves and move through it. Now, it's not really what the recording today is about. The recording today is more about just understanding the relationship between these four parts of ourselves and these bodies, how they relate to each other. And so in that understanding, like with the practice of the total being practice is to honor each layer of who you are. And so there are different practices that we can do to honor our mental body, honor our emotional body, honor our physical body, honor our energetic body, through our self-care practice. And for myself, there's things that I do each day to honor those. Now, this practice doesn't have to take 5 hours a day or 3 hours a day or even an hour a day. It's just doing something each day to honor all parts of those beings. And you begin to build this alignment of this relationship. And, in our society today, a lot of people are able to compartmentalize many things, and they also do that with themselves. And so the more we can bring a union back, or return to a union within all parts of our being in relationship to each other, in the prayer that I say, Ahom Takiyase, like that is Lakota language or Native American language for blessings to all relations. It's not just how like two different races of the human species can relate to each other. It's more about relationship. Like how does your liver relate to your kidneys? How does your emotional body relate to your physical body? And so we're blessing that relationship to evolve and to become more into union with itself in that process. So this practice of total being practice is really about unionizing, or to yoga. I mean, yoga means to union, to yoke, to bring together. And so it's really an ancient yoga practice, not so much of down dog on your yoga mat, but around like bringing union to the system. And that's what yoga is really about. Not to get up on that tangent. But the point is, like, we're bringing the yoga union of self together by being able just to begin to, just even acknowledging those four parts of your being besides any kind of activity or practice you need to add to it, really begins to bring some empowerment back into your system and really begins to bring a connection with yourself. And so just know that total being practice. And I'll list some examples in the email or that I've already sent out that you can read through and see what calls to you and try things. And, as we go through this Diamond Heart Project over the next 12 weeks, all the practices we implement are going to be catering to different parts of ourselves into finding what works for you and what honors you and your beautiful being. So that's the first part of the total being practice, and just why it's so important. And it's kind of one of the foundations in this program that we launch in the beginning of our practices. So the total being practice and finding out what works for you. Like I said, there's suggestions if you want some other suggestions or different things, or you try some different things that maybe aren't on the list. Please share, with the group. Maybe they can try those and see what resonates with them. All right. The next component we're going to move in today is called about sacred practices and rituals. When I say ritual, some people have an open mind to that. Some people have a construct as far as what they were taught when they were younger in their belief system and how they were raised. And a ritual is not always about rituals. A lot of times you see in the movies and that kind of things. They're not always, they're not always showing the true purpose or intention of what some people are doing, gathering a ritual about. But it's not so much about doing a ritual. It's about holding your practice in a certain container for yourself and holding a space for yourself. And it's very sacred. Your practices, everything in life is sacred. Everything in life is happening for you, never to you, never against you. And so when you can bring some sacredness to your practices, and that can look any which way that you like. Most of you have sat in ceremony with me, and so you see the sacredness I bring to these experiences. And I do that whether I'm with you in ceremony with 10 people or I'm by myself at my altar. That sacredness still comes with me in my practices, because these practices, at some time you'll begin to understand that how, these practices are going to be the lifeblood on navigating life. And whether you're in the Diamond Heart Project or not, you'll see, after this program is complete, that these things are going to be a grounding point or an anchor for you as you walk into your life. And, there are few and far between days where I don't get to my practices. And those days come up once in a while, and it's more a reminder of how important my practices are. And there's just a feeling within me different when I haven't dedicated any moment of my day to myself. And it really is, know your sacred practices are very selfless. And sometimes, if we have partners or roommates or friends or family that doesn't understand what we're doing, and we begin to create a different pattern of behavior in our life, and we begin to create a sacred space for us to maybe we have meditation before we go to breakfast. Maybe before we do our morning activities with our partner or our friend, we are now giving ourselves some space to meditate or do something for ourselves. And your practices are very much filling the well. And so you give yourself a moment to fill your well. So when you walk out in the world, you leave yourself into every moment, every conversation, be present, connect, coworkers, friends, family, loved ones, any moment, stranger, anything, any moment you walk into in your life, you're able to walk in fully because your well is already full and you're not consciously or subconsciously looking to get something from that moment because you already feel full. It's a very empowering thing. And so having a sacred space, as I talked about in meditation this morning, I always light a candle, whether I'm on the computer with you meditating or at my altar, there's a candle lit, and the candle is representing the light within myself. And it's also an offering, And so there's no right or wrong way to have a sacred space. There's no right or wrong way to have some kind of ritual essence to your practice. Just give you the power of ritual, and it can be whatever you want. But know that I have a certain way that how I walk into my practices, and I have a certain way that I walk out of my practices. And you've seen some of this in ceremony if you've sat together, where you see how I walk in with certain breath work, and then we do certain prayers, right? And then we do intention setting, no matter how many ceremonies you've come to, you see there's kind of a format. And I wouldn't really say it's a format. It's more of a ritualistic behavior that I have been called to or guided to create around these sacred experiences. And again, whether I'm with you in ceremony or I'm here at home by myself, there's still a way of walking into this. into this way of operating, these sacred practices. And so it can be whatever you want to you. But what I've noticed is that since I have a certain way of walking into, I can go to meditate anywhere. I'm meditating in the park or on a vacation or on the plane or at my altar. Like, because I have a certain way of walking into it, my system, again, that total being practice, my energetic system, mental system, emotional system, physical system begins to go, when he does this breath work, he's about to drop into meditation. Or when he does this prayer, he's about to do that. Or when he lights his incense and goes to the altar, he always does this after that. So let's go ahead and start tuning that in. And my being begins to dial it in before I even sit down doing breath work. My system is already like, oh, we know what you're about to do. And so that's one reason why the potency of the ritual or the sacred practice is so important, because your system begins to recognize, like, even though you're doing something new, or the DHP is going to have you like start doing some new practices your system isn't accustomed to yet, like it gets there. If you read anyone's done like Bikram yoga or Hot 26 yoga, I teach that, we always open up with this opening breath work where we open and close our arms as we breathe. And like, the moment I start doing that in the practice, my system is like, oh, we know what you're about to do. And it begins to dial it in. So I would say that's probably the most potent reason of why I'm suggesting that you have some kind of ritualistic behavior of how you walk into your practices and how you walk out. Because it's allow your system to it's kind of a foreshadowing to your system, like, we're about to do this, so let's go ahead and dial it in. And that's how I can sit in a 2-minute meditation, have a very deep process, because my system is prepared when I drop into that space. So that's a little different than the sacred space. Sacred space is more about setting up a space. There's a certain space I put my altar at. There's also a lot of teachers out there. There's a woman named Maria Diamond, where she suggests that she kind of is a spiritual feng shui teacher around. She'll let you know, like, where, based on your energetic makeup, like where your altar should be, what direction it should be in, based on your energetic makeup. And so again, Marie Diamond is somebody you could also reference or check into around if you're trying to build an altar in your system or in your home. It's always beautiful for that. Doesn't have to be an altar, but the point is, like, having a sacred space to dedicate, definitely as we begin to build this anchor in your being to focus on your sacred practices. It can be a cloth, it can be a crystal, it can be something you find that's really important to you. It could be a picture of your family, picture of you as a child. It could be, if you were raised in a belief system, it could be something of a belief that you have. So really, whatever you find sacred, there's no right or wrong space. It's whatever you consider to be sacred, but having some kind of space that is your sacred space for you to have your practices. If you need more guidance on that, let me know. But it's important. Like, maybe it's on the patio. Maybe that doesn't work during the wintertime. Maybe it's in your room. Maybe you have multiple sacred spaces. But something's dedicated for you. You don't share this altar space, or you don't share this like cushion with your partner. You have your own cushions. Maybe you have the same altar that you both meditate at, but you have your own space at the altar that's only dedicated to you. And so begin to create this important space for you, whatever it is. If you have any questions on that, let me know. This is much more of a conversational piece than it is a teaching offering. So the final thing I want to get into is going to be fasting. And fasting is such a beautiful practice. You find it in so many different traditions or lineages of spirituality or really religions on the planet. It's found everywhere. It's a very potent practice. It's one of my foundations of practices of fasting. In fact, I'm starting a fast today. And, I fast. I do dry fasting, which I don't drink or eat water. I don't eat food or drink water as part of my practice. I also do liquid and juice fasting. So I start with a juice fast or a water fast, move into a dry fast for a couple of days, and then come back out of it with a water fast. We can talk about those details later, but the point is, like, fasting is really, really powerful practice. It's not about anti-food and water. It's not about not consuming anything. What you're doing is you're allowing your system to reset itself. And most importantly, like, you burn 25 to 40% of your body's energy is used in digestion. So when you can remove that process, you can conduct the energy to other parts of your being, your emotional body, mental body, physical body, energetic body, into other spaces, and allows you to elevate your consciousness When I'm fasting, I use those times that I would normally be eating, and I implement a sacred practice. And I put that into the fasting. So instead of going and consuming something, if I'm having any kind of drought of food, I'll supplement that with a sacred practice. Whether I go meditate for a minute, or I go do something, or I go write, or I do something, implementing that time to dedicate my focus somewhere else. And that's why fasting is so potent, because usually you have some kind of intention around fasting. And again, when you find it in these different religious belief systems, like they're fasting for a certain intention based on their spiritual beliefs. And so it makes it very poignant, and it makes it very potent. And I know that my practices are elevated when I do my practices when I'm fasting. And so not just that, but also it's a practice that implements all parts of your being. But I would say the first benefit you're going to feel physical. Just to give you a scope on fasting, 1 day of dry fasting is compared to 3 days of water fasting. Either way, just know that when you fast, some very important things happen. One of them is that the whole microbiome of your stomach recalibrates itself into new bacteria. Second benefit of fasting is that your hormone production kicks up about 402,000% to give you energy. Remember, we're hunters and gatherers, to give you energy to go find food and water, right? It also helps your brain switch from glucose dependency to ketone dependency, and so it helps burn any kind of bacteria in the system, and also burn fat as energy compared to sugar. Not so much of this, I'm not talking about weight loss, but I'm talking about why that's important is because once you tune into more of a ketose space in the body, you begin to elevate autophagy. And autophagy is something that's profound in the system. What happens is when your body doesn't have substance or external stimulus for energy, your body begins to burn off things in the system that don't serve the highest potential of the body. So things like scar tissue, things like free radicals, things like damaged cells, things like fat that doesn't serve you. Not the good fat you have as a baby, but the fat that's been maybe accumulated by sugar or different things, or overconsumption of food, whatever doesn't serve you, fat around your organs. So your body begins to burn all this excess stuff in your body as energy to fuel you, again, technically to go find food and water. And so autophagy is one of the most incredible things that happens in fasting. And it's a way, as you ever had an animal, like when an animal gets sick, it won't eat and won't drink because it goes off and it rests while it lets its body clean itself and clear itself. So you can look deeper into this stuff, but I would say the biggest benefit of fasting is the autophagy effect that happens after a certain amount of time. And so when it comes to fasting for the DHP, I would recommend, getting to a goal of fasting 1 day a week. I would say 24 hours. I would not say start off with that. I would say start with a 12-hour fast. It's really easy to do when maybe you have your last food at, say, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then you fast until 9 o'clock in the morning. That's 12 hours. If you want to go further, you can also look at intermittent fasting. Maybe you go for a 16-hour, an 18-hour, or 20-hour fast in that process, or up to 24 hours. If you are somebody who resonates with you with called dry fasting, that is more of an elevated process. I can have a conversation with you, or we can talk about it live. You can propose your questions. That's a deeper discussion around dry fasting in that process. But I would just say that, either way, whatever one you want to do, I would start off with doing a 12 to 16-hour fast and start, before you go to bed. So that way your sleeping time is already engaged into that time frame. But we can talk more about that, but this is just a practice to start out with, and we can dive deeper into conversations live that I love to have. So there we have it for the day. Beautiful day, and have a blessed day and week, and we'll see you soon on the calls. Okay, blessings.